So Leona, I think that's us ready to start.
That's your recording now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to welcome you to this meeting of the local review body and to advise that we've received apologies from the chair and vice chair today. If we could take councillors' nominations for a chair for this meeting.
Oh, I really would like to put forward Councillor Miller.
Yeah. Councillor Miller, are you happy to chair the meeting?
Wait a second, they're right enough.
You're muted, I think, Angela.
That's what's wrong. I was muted. Sorry, I did say Stuart, but yes, I second
I
it.
saw your lips moving and I kind of lip read that and I kind of thought that was the case. Right, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. You quite happy to hand over, Sharon?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Right, can I welcome you all once again to the LRB and in attendance today we have Councillors Angela Convery and Councillor Jim Swift. We have Sharon McIntyre, the clerk to the committee, Andrew Benny, independent planning advisor, who has no input into any of the agenda items today, Siobhan Wilson, the legal advisor, and Eamon Daly, the democratic services manager. My name is obviously Councillor Stuart Miller. The apologies we've had quite a list. Councillors Ireland, Cunningham, McLean and Provost Fletcher. Okay, so that's that. Any declarations of interest? Don't all rush, thank you. We've been to all three sites today, the first of which is the Red House and Ayr Road. Can I ask, do we have sufficient information to determine the review?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I take it, Andrew, do you want to run through this first?
Yes, Councillor, or Chair rather. This will take some time because of the issues raised in the appeal, so I'll run through this as quickly as I can. First matter on this afternoon's agenda is review reference 2021-07 and relates to planning application reference 2020/0202 TP, the papers for which appear at pages 3 to 364 of the agenda papers. The address of the review is Red House at 438 Ayr Road, East Renfrewshire. And the proposals before the LRB this afternoon relates to an appeal against the provisions of Condition 1 of planning permission granted under the terms of planning application reference 2020/0202 TP. I can confirm, first of all, that there was no new information submitted as part of the review process. First of all, outline briefly the nature of the development approved under the planning permission reference that I've previously mentioned. Under the terms of this planning permission was granted for the erection of a cycle hub hire centre incorporating a cafe with formation of car park, erection of 8 bothy buildings, erection of wash block building, and the change of use and alterations to an existing dwelling house in the site to form holiday letting accommodation. This planning permission was granted subject to 17 conditions, with the first of these conditions, Condition 1, stating that the development hereby approved shall cease on the 18th of June 2026. At the end of the period of the permission, the buildings shall be removed and the land restored to its former condition. The reason given for this condition is as follows: to allow the planning authority to monitor the use of the site and to ensure that the proposal is viable and the use remains appropriate to the rural location. The request to review that is before the LRB this afternoon is an appeal against the terms of this condition and seeks to have this condition removed from the terms of the planning permission. For the sake of clarity, I can advise that the applicant's agent has confirmed that the other 16 conditions to which this permission is subject are all acceptable. Moving on, two representations have been received in respect of the planning application which forms the basis of this review. one of which objected to the proposed development, with the other being largely supportive of the proposals. I'll now outline the reasons for imposing the condition. Full details of the reasoning for the case officer's decision on this application are set out within the report of handling, which is provided at pages 61 to 78 of the agenda papers. The reasoning behind the decision to impose condition 1 is noted within the report of handling as follows. It is noted that the proposal includes a cafe which in itself would not be in keeping with the policies for the rural area. However, as outlined above, and that's earlier in the report of handling, the tourism and leisure facilities are acceptable in this location, and the cafe, although a significant contribution to income stream, could be acceptable as part of the overall proposal. It is therefore considered appropriate to condition the consent in the first instance for a temporary period of 5 years to ensure that the tourism and leisure facilities are viable and that the business overall can be established. Moving on now to the summary of the grounds of appeal put forward on behalf of the appellant. The grounds of appeal which have been submitted in support of the review are set out in full on pages 79 to 320 of the agenda papers. The appellant's agent has advised that condition 1 renders the proposed development unviable and critically undermines the benefit of the planning permission and is not in accordance with the requirements for planning conditions as set out in the Scottish Government Circular 4 of 1998, which relates to the use of planning conditions in planning permissions. The grounds of appeal highlight that Circular 4 1998 sets out, amongst other things, the 6 tests which all planning conditions must meet, noting that the circular makes clear that planning conditions should only be imposed where they are necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to the development to be permitted, enforceable, precise, and finally reasonable in all respects. It is further advised by the appellant's agent that the circular requires conditions to meet all of these tests. The grounds of appeal state that the case for the deletion of condition 1 of this planning permission is primarily premised on the basis that it is neither necessary nor reasonable in all other respects, and notes further that by association with failing these 2 tests, it could be extended that condition 1 also fails to meet all other requirements. The appellant's submissions in respect of these 2 specific tests are summarised as follows. First of all, the test of necessity. The first part of the reason refers to the planning authority monitoring the use of the site. However, the council is entitled and obliged to monitor development and or use in any circumstances, and as such, a planning condition is not necessary. The second part of the reason refers to the planning authority looking to ensure that the proposal is viable and the use remains appropriate to the rural location. Within the planning officer's report of handling, it is confirmed that the proposal meets the requirements of Strategic Policy 2 and Policy D1, and that the cycle hub and accommodation bothies are an appropriate rural use in terms of Policy D3, and quoting here that the proposed development is considered to be acceptable in appearance and would not detract from the visual amenity or character of the rural area. In light of these conclusions, it is stated that it must therefore follow that the approved development and use will be appropriate to the character of the site and the immediate surrounding area, which is impacted by the adjacent roads and nearby buildings and uses. As such, it is accepted by the council's planning officer that the proposal will not detract from the rural amenity or character of the area. And so by association, we, as the appellant's agent, consider that a planning condition is not necessary to further review and assess that at a later date. Therefore, by implication, the report of handling suggests that the Red House site itself is not regarded as being of typical rural character, and therefore it is unclear why it is felt necessary or how the council would consider if the use remains appropriate to the rural location. It is submitted that the condition itself renders the proposal unviable as the level of investment required to firstly implement the proposal and then subsequently restore the site to its former condition in less than 5 years' time are substantial and cannot be committed to without any certainty that the buildings in use will remain after the initial 5-year period. Whilst the report of handling states the officer's view that a cafe would in itself not be in keeping with the policies for the rural area, it is not accepted that this is inevitably the case. Indeed, there are at least 3 examples in East Renfrewshire Council area of cafe uses siting within buildings in the rural area, and they note the examples of the Collars Garden Centre to the south of Newton Mearns, the Whiteley Visitor Wind Farm and Mearns Castle Golf Academy. As far as the appellant is able to ascertain, the cafe uses at these locations are judged to be ancillary or component parts of a mixed use, and none of the planning permissions that apply to these were restricted in any way by a condition similar to condition 1. The cafe proposed at Red House is the same as it is part of a range of complementary uses that make up the whole development, and as such it should be treated as the same as the aforementioned examples and not burdened by a restrictive, unnecessary and unreasonable condition. In addition, this part of the reason is also notable in that it is implicit that for the use to remain appropriate, it was deemed to be appropriate when the permission was granted. It having been established that the use is appropriate, it is neither necessary or reasonable for it to be required to cease and be reassessed 5 years later. All of the above considerations point to the fact that condition 1 does not meet the requirement for a condition to be necessary and therefore should be deleted. I'll now move on to the appellant's comments in relation to the test of reasonable in all other respects. It is noted that condition 1 requires the approved development to cease on or before the 18th of June 2026, that being 5 years from the date of the planning permission. This amounts to the permission being temporary and is entirely unreasonable, not least because the permission allows for the demolition of some existing buildings, the erection of various new buildings, alterations to an existing building, and the use of the resulting buildings for various related purposes, all of which are proposed to be permanent elements and which have significant costs associated with carrying out the necessary works. For the planning permission to allow all of these uses to be carried out with significant associated costs, but then to require not only the use to cease, but also the buildings that have been constructed and or altered to be removed and the site restored to its former, at its current condition, is unduly restrictive and not reasonable or in line with Circular 4 of 1998. Moreover, the development date of the 18th of June 2026, it is inevitable that due to the time required to carry out the consented building works and for the use to become operational and then generate income, the actual operational period will be less than 5 years. Also, taken literally, condition 1 requires existing buildings that are to be demolished, to be put back in place, and for the alterations to the Red House to convert it to a self-catering apartment to be undone in order to restore the site to its original former condition. While the officers have in recent correspondence indicated that a permanent approval would most likely be granted after a 5-year period, the circular is very clear that an unduly restrictive condition can never be made acceptable by offering the prospect of informal relaxation of its effect. This further demonstrates that condition 1 is contrary to the provisions of Circular 4 of 1998. With regards to the other tests, the grounds of appeal set out detailed submission in respect of the remaining tests set out within the circular, the terms of which members will have noted from the review of the agenda papers. In overall terms, the appellant agent concludes by stating, this appeal statement sets out a clear and compelling case for the deletion of condition number 1 of the planning permission, as the condition renders the implementation of the consented development unviable and in effect nullifies the benefit of the permission. For the reasons set out, the condition is neither necessary nor reasonable and fails to meet the tests and requirements of Circular 4 1998. The development consented is entirely in line with the council's planning policies and will reactivate a former tea room as a facility to serve cyclists on the A77 cycle route, and which will support tourism, recreation, active travel and healthy lifestyles all in East Renfrewshire countryside. The development also represents a significant investment in an area by our client and will create tangible economic benefits through direct and indirect job creation. However, condition number 1 of the planning permission needs to be removed to enable these various benefits to be realised. Moving on now, just a number of reminders to members. There are a number of matters which members should be aware of in terms of their consideration of this review. First of all, members are reminded that they are required to determine this review against the relevant provisions of the adopted local development plan and also any other relevant material considerations, which would include the terms of the emerging local development plan 2. Secondly, members should be aware that in assessing the merits of this review, they do so on a de novo basis. That is to say, they do so as if the application were being considered for the first time. In doing so, members have 3 potential options open to them. First of all, if it is determined that condition 1 is necessary and appropriate, the review should be dismissed and the planning permission would remain unaltered. Second, if it is determined for whatever reason that condition 1 is neither necessary nor appropriate, the review should be upheld. This would result in the issue of an updated decision notice in relation to the application, which would see condition 1 deleted and all other conditions retained. Finally, if it is determined that condition 1 is inappropriate, but some form of controlling monitoring condition is nevertheless felt to be required, an alternative condition could be attached to the planning permission to replace condition 1, which would be deleted. All other conditions would remain unaltered. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. And I must admit, thank you, panel, for nominating me as chair, because normally the chair would pass it on to the group, but I'm going to get my top's worth in first. I've been in the Planning Applications Committee for 10 years, or almost 10 years. And there's a lot of times I can agree with the planners, and a lot of times I'll disagree with planners. And sometimes you scratch your head and you think, where did this come from? To me, this particular condition defies all logic. There is no reason at all that I can see that we grant something planning permission and then we tell them to knock it down so as we can determine its viability. Where this came from, I have no idea. I've never seen something like this in my life before, and I hope never to see it again. We have a tourism strategy within East Renfrewshire. Again, some of it I agree with, some of it possibly disagree. But this is flying in the face of any, we have a tourism strategy, this is going against it. And as explained earlier when we were out at the site earlier on, the say about the cafe is not in keeping with the rural area. Well, to be honest, this was a cafe 50 years ago, and it was a 4-lane, well, maybe a motorway at that time, certainly it was a 4-lane road at that time, and it was a successful cafe at that time. So I just find this absolutely incredible that they had attached this condition on it. That's my view. I'm interested to see, I think Angela, it was first. So what's your view, Angela?
I totally agree with you. I mean, the condition is just crazy. It's definitely not necessary, and it's not a reasonable condition by any stretch of the matter. I think that we should just go for option 2 and just remove this condition altogether.
Jim?
Yeah, well, as you guys know, I cycle quite a lot, and I cycle up and down the A77, and it's a busy place, and apart from the odd lunatic on the actual road when they shouldn't be, when there's a perfectly viable cycle path, it's a good place to cycle. And there's quite a lot of traffic, and like Stuart, I can just about remember going there as a wee boy to the tea room. So
You never did it.
I'd love to pretend so, but I don't dye my hair, so you know I'm an old guy. So I mean, what I'm trying to say is, if we're all about trying to encourage tourism and we're all about trying to encourage sustainable transport and get people healthy and get them moving, we need to provide amenities. And to make it financially impossible for anybody to do is just ridiculous. It's counterproductive. I'm astonished. I was astonished to read it, frankly. I'm appalled, and I think it's disgraceful.
Thank you very much.
It's disgraceful. And if we want to encourage people to invest in East Renfrewshire, to get with sustainable transport, to encourage inward tourism, then I don't know who makes these decisions, but it's not a good choice. It's not a good decision. And I agree with Councillor Convery. And from what you said, Councillor Miller, I think, Chair, you're on the same page. We're all saying the same things. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I don't see it as a bad thing. I would remove the condition completely, as per Councillor Convery's suggestion. So I'm happy to second her proposal.
Thank you. Well, obviously there are only three of us, and as you say, we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. So are you needing any more information, Siobhan? I think we've been fairly succinct in what we've said.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's on the basis of it not being necessary and being unreasonable. It's going to be removed.
Okay, right, that's fine. We move on to the second item on the agenda, is the one at Craighill Drive. The erection of 1.5 story rear extension with raised decking at 67 Craighill Drive, Clarkson. Once again, Andrew, would you like to comment on this one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Review 2021-08 relates, as the Chair has mentioned, to the refusal of planning application reference 2021/0044 TP, details of which are provided at pages 365 to 442 of the agenda papers. The address of the appeal site is 67 Craighill Avenue, Clarkston, and the proposal relate to the erection of a 1.5 story rear extension with associated raised decking. As a preliminary matter, I can advise members that new information has been received in this respect to this review, and at this stage, if I could pass over to Sharon, thanks. Just explain the implications. Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so there has been new information submitted, so it's up to the committee just now to decide whether they'd like to receive this information when making their decision. Andrew, can you just outline what the information is, just that's in the covering report for members?
Yes, what the appellant's agent has done, members, is provide a fairly long list of comparable examples of planning permission either having been granted for this type of rear extension, or indeed examples where the local review body have considered reviews for similar extensions, all of which were subsequently granted by the review body. So the nature of the information provided, in terms of the new information, it relates to details of relevant precedents in locations close to the review site.
So can I ask you, do we have enough information to make a decision now?
Yes.
I think we do, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Back to you, sorry, Sharon. Andrew?
Yes, I'll now just proceed to run through the review description. The application site comprises a detached hip roof bungalow with its associated curtilage and lies with an established residential area which is characterised by similar house types, and members may wish to refer to the location plan on page 431 of the agenda papers. The dwelling house has a square floor plan, with the result being that the existing roof form is generally pyramidal in shape. The proposed development comprises the erection of a 1.5-storey rear extension to the property. The extension would extend over the full width of the dwelling house and would project from the rear building line of the existing property by approximately 3.6 metres. In order to create the proposed upper level accommodation, the proposed extension would feature a gable end to its rear elevation. An area of raised decking would be located to the rear and side of the proposed extension. One objection has been received in respect of the application which forms the basis of this review. This objection stating that the proposed extension would be out of character with the surrounding area and would result in overlooking from the raised decking. I'll now move on to summarise the reasons for the planning officer's decision. Full details of the reasoning for the case officer's decision in this application are set out within the report of handling, which is provided at pages 385 to 396 of the agenda papers. The report of handling indicates that the application requires to be assessed against terms of policies D1 and D14 of the adopted local development plan and also the supplementary planning guidance household development guide. The report of handling advises that the SPG states that extensions to the rear of bungalows should have the same roof design as the original house and should not form a gable end, and goes on to advise that the introduction of the proposed rear gable, which is stated as being a feature alien to the original dwelling house and most other dwelling houses within the immediate area, would be at odds with the character and design of the existing dwelling house. Accordingly, the report of handling states that the proposals do not comply with policy D14. Given the visibility of the proposed extended roof from the street, the report of handling further states that the proposed extension would be highly visible and an incongruous feature in the streetscape to the detriment of the visual amenity and character of the area, and that as such, the proposals are contrary to policy D1. These considerations are reflected in the three stated reasons for the refusal of the application, as set out in the decision notice on the applications, which is provided at page 397 of the agenda papers. The appellant's grounds of grounds of appeal in respect of this review can be summarised as follows. The case put forward in support of this review by the appellant is set out in full on pages 401 to 432 of the agenda papers, with the appellant's agent stating that it is not agreed that the proposed alterations and extensions to 67 Craig Hill Drive would be a highly visible and incongruous feature on the streetscape to the detriment of the visual amenity and character of the area, given that it would be entirely to the rear of the property. Furthermore, there is a significant degree of precedent for full-height rear extensions to properties within the surrounding area. Many of these also include the raising of the ridge height to the dwelling house, or raising of the ridge height of the original dwelling house. The appellant's agent goes on to state that whilst it is generally accepted that every planning application must be determined on its own individual merits, having regard to the provisions of the development plan and other material considerations, it is vitally important for the credibility of the planning process that decision makers are consistent in their approach. It is also well-established case law that previous planning decisions are capable of being material considerations, meaning that they must be taken into account by those determining subsequent applications for planning permission for similar cases. Could I remind members that they're required to determine this review against the relevant provisions of the adopted local development plan and also any other relevant material considerations, which in this case would include the terms of emerging local development plan 2. And finally, in the event of this review being upheld, the following conditions should be attached to any planning permission thus granted. The reason being, or the condition being, the development shall not commence until samples of the external finishing materials to be used and the proposed extension have been submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. Thereafter, the development shall be implemented in accordance with these approved details, with the reason for this suggested condition being to ensure that the appearance of the proposed development is acceptable. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Andrew. Yeah, okay. Anyone get? I'll throw it up to the committee to start off with.
I'm quite happy to come in if you're comfortable with me coming in.
Yeah, shoot, Jim.
I do recall that we had a meeting and all three of us were there, including lots of other senior planning officers, and it was good of you to remind us of that, Councillor Miller, where we agreed that we weren't particularly bothered about what do you call these types of
Lens.
Thank you, gable ends, and we have approved a few of them on appeal, and the planners agreed to take away our thoughts on this and other matters, like stepping down extensions and things like that, and come up with a new set of policies. These policies have never seen the light of day. So my opinion is, given that the elected members should decide, and it wasn't just I don't think it was just the people on the planning applications committee. I think there were some other councillors there as well. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, and we both looked at the decking. All three of us have rather looked at the decking, and we don't see that there's a problem because it's a great big hedge and a garage in the way, and so I can't see it imposing any issues on the neighbours. So I'm quite happy to propose that we support the application.
Thanks, Jim. Angela.
You're muted, Angela.
You're mute, Angela.
I was actually unmuted and I've just muted myself, sorry. I agree with Councillor Swift about the gable end. I mean, we have had numerous ones in front of us and we have passed quite a few of them, if not all of them. As for the complaint, the objection that came in from the neighbour, I was a bit confused about the complaint because the neighbour said about the overlooking. Now the neighbour's building is like the elevation there at the top of the elevation, so they would basically be overlooking into them. And they've also got a garage that's situated where the decking is going to be as well. So I was a bit confused as to the grounds of their objection. I agree with Councillor Swift, as I've said. I don't see any problem with this, any issue with this at all, and we should approve it.
Thank you very much. I'm really not going to say too much because everybody knows my feelings in gable ends, whether they look good or they don't look good. I think they're practical, and I think everything about this extension is practical. One of the things that was stated that it might not look too good from the streetscape, but as the agent or householder pointed out, that everything's at the back of the house. Therefore, the only way that you'll be able to see any of this extension is actually from Sundale Avenue. As you walk in or drive in from Sundale Avenue, you'll see it if you're actually looking for it. But generally speaking, if you're driving in from Sundale Avenue, you'll be looking at the road and not looking at neighbours' houses. So I think that it's pretty unanimous that we vote to approve this application. I'll leave it with you, Siobhan. You think you can?
Let's pass to Sharon to confirm.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just confirm the decision of the committee there. So that's to reverse the officer's decision and approve planning permission, subject to the condition outlined by the planning advisor and the standard delegated conditions.
Okay, we're happy with that.
Yeah.
See folk nodding. Okay, we'll move on to the last item in the agenda, which is 68 Hill Drive, Eaglesham. And this is again for a side extension. I'm told that we do have new evidence, or do we need new evidence, or do we have enough evidence to make a decision now?
Happy with what we've got, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
Right, yours again. If you can make it as brief as you can, that'll be fine.
Thank you, Chair. Review 2021-09 relates to the refusal of planning permission 2021-0053 TP for the property at 68 Hill Drive, Eaglesham. The proposals themselves relating to the erection of a two-storey side extension to the dwelling house with associated formation of rear dormer window and erection of a front porch. The application site comprises a two-storey semi-detached dwelling house which lies within an established residential area which is typified by properties of a similar style to the application site. The proposals involve the erection of a two-storey side extension to the property which would effectively double the width of the existing property. This extension would lie in line with the existing front building line of the property, with the proposed ridge line running through at the same level as that of the original existing roof. Externally, the extension would be finished to match the finishes on the existing dwelling house. The proposal is in an established residential area and consists, no representations have been received in respect of the application, which forms the basis of the review. In terms of the planning officer's decision, the reasoning is set out in full within the report of handling, which appears on pages 455 to 464 of the agenda papers. The report of handling indicates that the application requires to be assessed against policies D1 and D14 and also the associated supplementary guidance note on householders design. The report of handling advises that the proposals are contrary to the specified SPG criteria for site extensions, as it would be considerably more than the 50% allowance in terms of the frontage width of the property. It would not be set back from the frontage of the dwelling house and would have the same ridge line as the original dwelling house. It is considered that the size and scale of the extension would be inappropriate to the original form of the dwelling house. Consequently, it is considered that it would dominate and overwhelm the dwelling house to the detriment of its existing character. In addition to its impact on the dwelling house, it is considered that the scale and size of the extension would unbalance the semi-detached pairing. This would have an adverse impact on the character and visual amenity of the immediate locale, especially given that the site is on a prominent corner plot. Extensions of this size are not a common feature in the area, and therefore it is considered that the proposal is significantly out of keeping with the surrounding built form. The report of handling notes that the front porch in itself is of an acceptable scale and design, with the same conclusions being drawn in terms of the rear dormer window. In terms of the case put forward by the appellant, those are set out in pages 471 to 488 of the agenda papers, with the appellant simply seeking to highlight that there are numerous properties with surrounding area that have similar extensions, with a number of photographic examples of these comparable extensions having been provided. Could I remind members that they're required to determine this review against the relevant provisions of the adopted local development plan and also any other relevant material considerations, which would include the terms of emerging LDP2. In the event of this review being upheld, I would suggest that the following condition be attached to any permission thus granted. Development shall not commence until samples of the external finishes to be used on the proposed extension have been submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. Thereafter, the development shall be implemented in accordance with these approved details, with the reason being to ensure that the appearance of the proposed development is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Once again, if we go back to the meeting we held 3-4 years ago, whatever it was, with the planners, they didn't like they always wanted the ridge line step down or step back. They wanted the extension to be either step back, well, usually step back. In this case, the ridge line is going to be the same as the current one, and the extension is going to be in line with the current house. I'm absolutely 100% agreement with that. The only place I have a problem with is that it's going to be more than 50% of the current house. But in mitigation to that, if you're going to be building a room, you might as well build it to the standard you want now, rather than have to come back to an extension on in another 5 or 10 years' time. What's the committee's views on it, Councillor Convery?
Thanks very much, Stuart. For once, I agree with the planners on this one. It is considerably more, as they said, than 50% of the frontage of the dwelling. It looks like it's going to be very large, and it looks to me like it's like a second home that's going to be attached to it. So, as it is considerably more than 50% of the frontage of the dwelling, I think it should be refused this time.
Councillor Swift?
I have sympathy with Councillor Convery's opinion, but I kind of differ. Again, I'm with. I mean, the ridge height thing. That's something we discussed ages ago, and it's just a matter of aesthetics. And frankly, one person's meat is another's poison, etc. And you know, it just minimises the capacity for space. I'm kind of reluctant to ask them to go way back and reduce it just a little bit, because I don't think it's that bad, and I don't think it overwhelms the site. And the most important thing for me is not whether it conforms to stepped down ridge lines and step back fronts, or even 50% more space, is what impact would that have on their neighbours. And the only window that overlooked that house, or would be the window from a bathroom, and it's quite a way behind and oblique to it. So I actually think it's a wee bit larger than I would like, but I'm going to, on balance, probably go for approval. I would support it.
Angela, I see your hand back up again.
Thanks very much, Stuart. I just think that we really need to be careful if we approve this one with the 50% curtilage, because it wasn't that long ago, and I remember that we refused one in Barhead because, and it was a side extension, the same as this, because it was more than 50% of the frontage of the dwelling. So I just think that we could be opening a can of worms if we approve this one.
Thanks, Angela. I do have a problem with the 50%, because, as has been said earlier, I've been on this committee for some considerable time, and as you say, Angela, we have rejected applications with more than 50%. But we have to take every individual application on its own merits. And I think this site is not going to be overdeveloped, because there is going to be a good part of garden, as we do lots of steps to climb up to it. There's a good bit in the behind it, a good bit of garden area behind it, so we're not going to take that away. And not only that, I don't know if when you were going round, there's a couple of extensions very similar to this, further round Hill Drive. And I find it very difficult to refuse something that there is houses much the same on the same street. So I'm going to propose that we approve this application. Do you have a seconder?
You do. I'll second that.
Thank you. Anyone otherwise minded to uphold the planning officers? Angela? Yeah.
Myself, I don't think we should be approving this one.
We'll struggle.
Obviously, I'm not going to be a seconder if there's only 3 of us.
Even I can count that high.
Now you know how I feel at a council meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
So on that basis, I'll just summarise there. So it was proposed there by Councillor Miller and seconded by Councillor Swift to reverse officer's decision and approve planning permission subject to the condition outlined by the planning advisor and standard delegated conditions. And Councillor Convery's amendment fell because there's no seconder. the decision of the committee.
Happy to go with the conditions that Andrew stated earlier on. Okay, so that was finished with no
That
nothing.
was a knife edge decision there. It was a knife
was.
edge decision.
I brought out respect there.
Other
Well,
tough-
can I thank everyone for attending?
Thank you.
Even
Have a good
Evan.
Thanks for stepping up as the chair.
No, I'm actually sitting down.